everyone! We're back sa ating online mentoring, and this week we will talk about storms in life. Yes, true enough, we cannot avoid or storms in life are inevitable. Sa gusto natin, makakaranas po tayo ng mga bagyo. Even in our spiritual life, we will experience the so-called spiritual storms. That's why we need to anchor our lives in Jesus. So ang pag-uusapan natin ang kwento ni Apostle Paul when he had experienced shipwreck in Acts chapter 27. So our mentoring is taken from the key verse in verse 29 of Acts chapter 27. In the NIV version, the word of God declares, fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. One person may ask, why is an anchor important? The answer is, the purpose of an anchor is to keep a ship safe and secure at the desired location or to help control the ship during bad weather. So, ang pag-uusapan po natin, spiritual anchors. There will be a time in the life of us Christians that one will come upon a real storm. Maaring ito'y hurricane force. That's why it is very essential na tayo po ay mag-drop ng mga anchors na ito tulad po ng ginawa ni Apostle Paul during that shipwreck experience. So what is a spiritual anchor? A boat anchor helps keep a boat attached to one place on the ocean floor so that it does not go adrift in the sea. Likewise, a spiritual anchor is something that helps us keep us grounded, connected to what matters most, and able to cope with the challenges that life brings. So, ito po ang suggested na 4 anchors that we need to drop in times of storms sa ating pong mga buhay. Number 1 is the anchor of faith. As the Word of God declares in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6 in the Amplified Version, but without faith it is impossible to walk with God and please Him, for whoever comes near to God must necessarily believe that God exists and that He rewards those who earnestly and diligently seek Him. So even in the midst of that raging storm, Apostle Paul found that he was not alone because the Lord came to him to minister peace to his heart. In like manner, even in our lives, hindi man po natin makita with our tangible eyes ang presence ni Lord o maramdaman ito. But the Word of God declares that God is with us, and He promised us that He will never leave us nor forsake us. And the second anchor that we need to drop is the anchor of hope. Apostle Paul weathered that long, terrible storm because the Lord came to him with a precious promise. He reminded Paul that he would stand before Caesar and that all those on the ship were to be spared as well. For Apostle Paul, just having a word from God was enough to anchor him and give him blessed assurance. Bakit po? Because Paul knew that God was as good as His word. That's why the author of Hebrews 10:23 says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we professed, for He who promised is faithful. And number 3, anchor of love. Yes, nothing that enters our life is able or sufficient to separate us from God's love demonstrated at the cross. God's love allows each one of us to be a conqueror in adversity. Even Apostle Paul says this in Romans 8:35, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And last anchor is the anchor of surrender. And when we say surrender, we need to give something up. We need to surrender our lives to the Lord, even in the midst of storms, even the fear that we experience during the storm, we need to surrender to God. As King Solomon declares in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 to 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. So dropping this anchor releases us to fully trust God, our Father, because in surrender, we no longer hold on to the problem, freeing us to fully embrace Jesus and all the powers available to him. My question for you today, have you dropped your anchors deep in the Lord? If you have, then you can weather life's storms. If you haven't, don't wait for the storm to begin. Anchor your life in Jesus. Drop the 4 spiritual anchors: the anchor of faith, the anchor of love, the anchor of hope, and the anchor of surrender. God bless you all.